Hello! Welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. On this episode, we're going to be making ice cream, but we're going to do it without an ice cream machine. You don't have to have an ice cream machine. You don't have to have an ice cream maker to make ice cream. You just have to have a strong will and willingness to go forward. Okay? Come a little closer, and I'll show you what we're going to use to make this wonderful mint chocolate chip ice cream without a machine. Now on our ingredients, very simple. I have here 2 cups of milk and 2 cups of heavy cream. And this is going to make slightly over 1 quart once we get the other ingredients mixed in there, and when it freezes it also expands a little. So it's a good amount of ice cream. Here I have a little over 1/2 of a cup of sugar. In fact, you could do 1/2 of a cup plus 1 tablespoon, and that's just dead on correct. Right here, this is 1 cup of chocolate chips. Now I like to use the semi-sweet morsels. I think they make a really good tasting mint chocolate chip ice cream, and that slightly bitter effect of it really contrasts well with the sweetness of the ice cream. So give that a try. Right here I have 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. This is 1 teaspoon of mint extract. And here I have 1/2 of a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now the vanilla really doesn't shine through on the flavor very much. However, it is very associated with the flavor of cream, and it goes well with cream. So it's just going to enhance the flavor of your ice cream is all it's going to do. It's going to make it a little more rich. People won't really notice that flavor in there over the mint. Okay, now we want to move on to our first step, which is cooking off this milk. But first let me explain how we're going to do this without a machine. You're going to need a pair of bowls. Let me move these out of the way. Now on your bowls, let me look back here, I have 2 bowls. One is roughly half of the size of the other. See how it nests down inside of there, and I have a good 1.5 inches all the way around on that? That's exactly what you're looking for. In fact, it sets about 1.5 inches below the top of this, so when it floats up in its brine solution, it'll set just like this. And what we're going to do is just use ice and salt and make a brine solution in this larger bowl and set this right down into it. For my ice, I'm just using plain old ordinary ice cubes right out of my own refrigerator. So I'll be using something like that. You can go with ice that you purchase if you want. These cubes are usually a little large, so I'm going to break them down a little bit by banging this bag on my sink just a bit. Okay, now let's start with cooking our milk, and this is an important part. When we cook that milk, it changes the flavor. This is called scalding. And scalding the milk, used to be done to basically pasteurize it or make it safe to use. This is no longer the case. So what we're going to do now, placing our milk in this pan, I'm going to bring this up in temperature over a medium to medium-high heat, and we're going to take it up to 180 degrees. Now milk boils at 185, so don't let it go over that. We don't want to boil the milk, we only want to scald it. And by heating it, it also allows me to dissolve the sugar better, and I don't get any kind of a grittiness in my ice cream in the finished product. So this is just a really healthy step to do. I'll bring my temperature down here. There we go, got a medium-high heat. Now let's change views, and we're going to watch this thing heat up. Now as I'm heating my milk, I also want to stir it gently. So what I'm going to do is to use a simple rubber spatula. You can use a wooden spoon for this also, this works well. Gently and occasionally stir your milk. You don't have to sit down there and stir it constantly, but you want to move it around at least every 2 to 3 minutes. And this is while it's heating. This will prevent it from skinning over. If it forms a skin, it's going to make a real mess for you. You don't want to deal with that, okay? So, just occasional stirring. That's all we have to do. Now I'm going to put this aside. We're going to wait for our temperature to rise on this from where it's at down here. It's slightly over 100 degrees. So I'm going to take it up right about here where it's around 280 degrees. Or excuse me, sorry about that. 180 degrees. Do not take it over 180 degrees. 200 would ruin it. Alright, now It's just a matter of time. This does not take that long. Now I do two different formats on my films. I do a cook-along format where I cook side by side with you through the entire meal, and that's what you're watching here. If you're not interested in doing the cook-along format where we actually take the time to allow somebody to see how long it takes for the milk to heat and the change that it goes through, then it's something you might want to just switch over to the short version. Now I do have a short version on this same video, so give that a try if you're not interested in doing cook-along. Cook-along is great if you want to set up a device in the kitchen. I will cook side by side with you, and it gives you the opportunity of having a tutor right next to you on how to cook. Now this is also a good time when you begin this to place these chips right here in the freezer. The colder they are, the better it is. I have my chips in the freezer now. We're cooling. And I want to keep my milk refrigerated as well. These are important steps because in a little bit we're going to have to make sure that our mixture is nice and cold when we put those chips in it. We don't want our chocolate melted. The tips that you're getting right now, these are the kind of tips that you don't get on the short version. And one of the things that if you're a growing cook and you're really wanting to improve, this is the kind of thing that could truly improve you. The little tips, the little tidbits that set you apart from other people in the way they cook. After we scald this, bringing it up to 180 degrees, and it's just about there, if you notice on the edge, it's forming a foam. Okay, and it's that little foamy condition that we're looking for. Okay, I've just now reached 180 and I'm dropping the heat. So, you notice the steam coming up, there's foam around the edge, there's a distinct change in the odor of the milk, and that's exactly what I'm looking for when I'm making ice cream. Now, I've removed my thermometer, put in the sugar. And if you notice, I was teaching you about that froth on the edge. That's how you know if you don't have a thermometer, okay? Also, you can use what's referred to as a cooking thermometer or a chef's thermometer. Those are very common. It's a good thing to have in the kitchen. That little thermometer is like this. And this one's a digital readout. Simply put this right down into your liquid and it tells you, like 72 right now, it'll tell you the exact temperature we have in there. 62, 64. So you see that sugar brought my temperature down slightly. And as I dissolve it in, keep stirring it, you'll know when the sugar is fully dissolved because you won't feel that gritty sensation underneath your spatula. So just keep stirring until it's fully dissolved. Now, I have to bring this down in temperature the same way I brought it up. And I actually want this to be below about, 90 degrees. If I can get it down closer to 80, it would be even better. And that's before I put my cream in there. The cream will finish bringing it down in temperature low enough for us to then add the chocolate morsels. Now when you're making ice cream, in addition to the the ice that I showed you earlier, you're also going to need some salt. Rock salt works wonderful for this. You can also just use regular table salt. Any kind of salt will work fine, but you're going to need plenty of it to sprinkle over the top and really get that ice to cooling down. And what happens there is when ice melts quickly, like under the influence of salt, the temperature of it falls dramatically. And in fact, I've had temperatures as low as 5 degrees when I'm making ice cream, which is a little bit on the cool side. That will sometimes freeze it too quickly and it becomes uneven in its texture. So there is a trick on this. Now here's where you want to pause your video. And what I'm going to do is put my thermometer right back in this, and this is going to allow me to watch when that temperature falls down here below 100, and then at that point we're going to turn the film back on and finish up this little simple recipe. Now this is something where you can just kind of go and relax for 20 or 25 minutes, and that'll give it plenty of time to cool off. I'm also going to remove it from this burner and set it on a cooling rack. There we go. Alright, it's a matter of time right now. Give it some time and we'll mix in the rest of our ingredients and make the most magnificent tasting simple ice cream you've ever had. Well, our temperature has now come down below 90 degrees, and this is a good time to go ahead and start putting in the other ingredients. So I'm going to add in that peppermint extract. I'm also going to switch to a whisk just to make this a little easier. There we go. The vanilla. Again, that just hides in it, but brings out that cream flavor so well. And the salt. Pull my cream out of the refrigerator now. Remember, you want to keep that cold so that you can further bring this temperature down right here. Put that in there. And pull out what I can with my spatula. There we go. Now I'm going to need a little bit more accurate thermometer than the first one I was using. So I'm going to use my regular cooking thermometer here. I'm checking my temperature. Now it's 68.7 degrees, and that's a good temperature. It's actually falling a little. That's a good temperature. I don't have to worry about my chocolate chips melting at that temperature. So what I want to do now is pull those chocolate chips out of the freezer. And set them to the side. And I'll take the bowl that I'm going to be chilling the ice cream in. And I just want to pour this mixture right down into that bowl. Now, at this time, if you want to make this green, then feel free to add in some food coloring. And actually, I'm feeling a moment of inspiration, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now, you do not have to have green food coloring in this, okay? But a lot of people kind of associate the mint chocolate chip ice cream as something that comes out green, because that's what you always see when you're at the grocery store. When you purchase that, they put it in there. So what the heck? Let's make ours a little bit green also. There, I have a beautiful green color. I can go ahead and place my chocolate chips in there. Now, the next thing I need to do is to simply prepare a brine. This is going to be the bowl that I chill the ice cream in. And the brine, as we mentioned before, is a mixture of ice and salt. I've taken the ice cubes that I had and broken them up just a little bit, and you can break these up a little bit more or less to your liking. There's a couple of ways. You can bang that bag on the counter or in a sink. You can use a skillet bottom. This way, we kind of break our cubes up into smaller pieces. What this does is it accelerates the melt. I'm going to go ahead and put some of this in the bottom. Get started here. Put some of the salt that we have over the top. That way I get a melting condition started. I can go ahead now and place this bowl on top of that. From here, I just need to build this up a little bit. So I'm going to be adding in some ice along the sides, very gently. I'm just going to keep filling this up. And I'll layer it with ice, salt, as I go around. This is the same way we do it in the old-fashioned style ice cream machines. Say this, my hand is getting nice and cold. Clean up my counter a bit here. Now, back to placing in a little more of that salt. Be careful about this, you don't want to get into your ice cream. Better to get a little on the counter than in the ice cream. Now again, that's going to have to melt. I want to get my second bag. And I had 2 bags of this ice sitting out. I'm going to break this other apart. That was a bit noisy, but effective. Now this is, as I mentioned before, just the regular cubed ice that I produce in my own freezer. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a bag of ice for this even. As I mentioned before, table salt will work for this. You're going to use a lot of it. So don't be afraid to go through a couple of cups of salt in the making of this ice cream. Go. My hand is almost totally frozen now. Ouch. Alright. Now, it's just a matter of waiting. I'm going to stir this lightly. And I'm going to do that about every 5 minutes. Now, most of the time when I make ice cream this way, it takes anywhere from, just depending on how cold I get this brine, usually anywhere from about 35 to 55 minutes. In fact, last time I did it, it was almost dead on at 45 minutes. Now, I'll put the remainder of my ice in my freezer. Keep that cold and ready to use as this starts to melt down. Very gently. Salt. around that edge. As I mentioned before, you want to be careful about this because you don't want to get any of that down in your cream mixture. Okay, now what we're going to do is just keep an eye on this, and we're going to kind of do a time-lapse situation. I'm not going to film just watching a steady bowl doing nothing. But what we'll do is about, like I said, every 5 minutes, I'm going to come in and give it a nice simple stir, just like so. Now, you don't have to use a whisk. You can also stir this with a spatula or wooden spoon. I find for this part, the spatula works really well, especially after it's starting to get to where it's freezing up. That is when it works best of all, because you're going to have to scrape that frozen ice cream away from the bowl and displace it with some of the wet that is in the center. So, really neat way of making ice cream. So simple, isn't it? See, you don't need an ice cream machine. Now, I've chosen this particular recipe because it allows us to see those chocolate chips. Right now, they're all sitting on the bottom down there. And see there? They're just kind of hanging out. But as this starts to freeze, you're going to see those chips becoming suspended in the frozen ice cream, and it's a good way to get a good visual on making this particular product. So here we go with our first time lapse. Let's just give it another 5 minutes. It has now been 5 minutes, so gently, and see those chips are starting to freeze to the bottom. I can feel that down there. I'm breaking them free. There we go. And that'll probably happen again. Just be prepared for it. There we go. Now they're mixing well. So, I want to push down the sides to remove any material that could have frozen. And we're in the process of just refrigerating this milk mixture. I want to take a quick look at that temperature. Still falling at 47.6 degrees. Okay, so it's chilling nicely. We just have to give it some more time, again, once every 5 minutes. It has been another 5 minutes. The outside of the outer bowl is completely iced over. And down in here, of course, those chips are sticking on the bottom again. But that's okay. That's not a problem. Because that means there is some freezing action against that edge that's happening. So they're wanting to stick. And what's happening is down in this outer bowl, shake that ice down a little bit, that brine is starting to build, the liquid is starting to rise up, and as that liquid forms, it's going to be exceptionally cold. Now let's take a quick peek and see if the temperature of our cream is coming down much. Sure enough, 39.2 degrees. Nope, down to 38 now. So it's falling rapidly. Now, let's give it about a 4-minute break, maybe 5. And remember, just keep stirring it. And if you want to stir it more often, that's fine too. This is real simple. We're going to have us ice cream real soon. Okay, we're at 5 minutes. Now, if you notice, I have a spoon handy also. Those chips are really starting to stick badly on the bottom. So I've got a spoon to kind of break those loose. There we go. And now that we are getting a good freezing action, see on the side of the bowl I'm getting frozen cream there. This is where it matters. We're going to have to start stirring a little more regular. So we are now at the process where it is actually starting to freeze. Getting some ice crystals. That's excellent. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to keep stirring this. But I want to stir it now about once every minute or so. Yeah, good action there. Also, as I mentioned earlier, a whisk works really well for this. But after about halfway through the freezing, it gets to where the whisk is going to start bending too much. So, we're going to go ahead and pause the video for another 5 minutes, and you'll see the next time lapse. Well, this is going really well. If you'll notice, see how the cream is getting thick and it's starting to freeze? Bring it around, see there? So, as I just keep scraping it off the sides, the mixture in the center keeps getting thicker. So we're busy making ice cream here. Now understand something, we're starting to get good freezing action, and we're only, what, 20 minutes into this? Well, into the freezing portion of it. And if you'll notice, some of those chocolate chips are starting to get suspended on the surface of the liquid. Just as I mentioned, they would become suspended up inside of it instead of sticking to the bottom. It's another good sign. So, let's keep on and we'll do another 5-minute time lapse. Now, it hasn't been quite 5 minutes yet, but what I wanted to do, before I do it, I got to give this a stir, because I'm stirring this every about 1.5 to 2 minutes now. I want to get some temperature readings. And the first one I want to get is right here in our cream. So we're down, that shows 27.5 degrees. Okay, so rather cold. Let me get a temperature reading on our brine here. It's 10.6 degrees and falling. So basically I have a very cold brine, which is the reason I'm getting this nice freezing action. That's actually just how ice cream makers work. All they do is churn the ice cream, which means to turn it around and move it. And the more you do that, the less lumpy it'll be. And it allows the liquid to come in contact with the metal surface of the bowl, thereby freezing more of it as you stir it. So we slowly get this beautiful, soft, smooth texture. So, there's our temperatures on it. It's giving you some idea of what's happening. Keep stirring and stir frequently now. We now are at the 25-minute mark. And again, I give it a little stir. As you notice, it's thickening even more. I'm getting good suspension of the chips in the cream mixture. So, here we go, timing out another 5 minutes. Our ice cream is coming along. We've now been 30 minutes on this, and look at this. Isn't that cool? So, that tells you there's success, okay? You just got to keep it up until it is as thick as it needs to be. And I know it's awful tempting just to spoon it out when it's like this, but go ahead and let it finish forming its texture. It gets better as it goes. Get down in that brine. Here we go. 5 more minutes. Here we are. We've reached our 25-minute mark. Excuse me, 35-minute. Oops. Lost track of time, didn't I? There we go. Now this is just, it's getting kind of stiff. That's good. It's getting really thick now. It's softer than a soft serve ice cream at this point, but pretty soon it'll be there. So I give it a little more time, another 5 minutes. We have now arrived at our 40-minute mark. If you'll notice, the ice cream is starting to hold shape pretty well. Just keep turning it about once every 1 to 2 minutes. Now, at this point, if you have a heavy whisk, you can run a heavy whisk through this and it will fine it. And what that means is it's just going to take out some of that coarse graininess and make it a little bit smoother. That is not necessary, but if you're just looking to make it absolutely perfect, give that a shot. It's not something that isn't too important to me. Look at this, I'm getting a good peek on it. So, we're going to take it on up to 45 minutes and see what we get. Well, you caught me. Went ahead and did it. Ran that whisk through it to give me just a little bit better texture. Uh-oh. Well, here we are. We're up on about that 45-minute mark, aren't we? This has gotten quite thick. I'm stirring it about once every minute now. As you saw, I went ahead and hit it real quick with a whisk. You don't have to do it a whole lot that way. And that will, for a moment, make it seem a little bit softer, but it'll refirm quickly. Now, when you get to this point where it'll actually hold stiff peaks like that, you can take this at this point and go ahead and place it in your freezer. Okay? You can just serve it up like this and have you a nice soft serve ice cream. That'd be wonderful. You can firm it a little bit more in your freezer so that you can cut out some balls, you know, using a ice cream scoop or a what they call a disher. So what I'm going to do is refrigerate this, refreeze this, and that way I'm going to end up with a little more firm product. But here we have it, guys. You can do this out in the woods, on a camping trip. You can pretty much bring this up anywhere. And it's so simple, doesn't take a machine or anything, and you'll blow everyone's mind when you surprise them with something like this that's totally unexpected. So, enjoy your ice cream. Use any recipe you want with this technique and you've got it made. There you have it. Very simple. Ice cream, but without an ice cream maker. So, a couple of bowls, a little bit of your time, and suddenly you're ready to just have a good time. I'm going to reach over here and get a spoon. Now, I'm just going to try this. It's wonderful, beautiful ice cream mixture. There we have it. Perfect soft serve ice cream. Beautiful. Give it a try. Crunchy chocolate chips. Love that. That's a treat at any time. You'll make some happy faces with this. So simple. Wow. I tell you what, thank you. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today. Thank you for subscribing. And if you haven't, please do subscribe. You have a good day. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking Today, the show where you can get great recipes and the best techniques are taught. Please subscribe to Texas Cooking Today, where you will always find something hot and ready to eat.